Philosophers make neither minds nor materials. They merely have a discussion betwixt both parties. A major influence from the point of view of history on our current mood as a Dasein, as Dasein, has a being that thinks certain phrases make sense. Science, it's true, or reason, it's the greatest thing on earth, or we will all live happily ever after, or some such. Whichever phrases are the most cogent by a popularity contest, we could say represent in an essential way Das Man as it is. This Das Man presumably has a history which is still living over in the life of the cogency of these phrases, which seem to hang in a place which is neither the mind, which the philosophers cannot possibly create, but only can comment on, or the material world, which the philosophers also cannot possibly create, but only discuss and somehow bring into connection with the mind. Here we see that there is a great cogency to the idea that this ground in between is the ground of conversation properly, which is then somehow, and conversation meaning not only conversation with each other, but also each with themselves, so that a conversation is going on even if in the sort of Aristotelian sense that an primary substance is something separate from another primary substance, and those are embodied in two different animals, whether it's Jane and Sam or some others, whoever it may be, some particular beings. Instead, the discussion is already prefigured to be happening as soon as there's this sense that in an earlier video I mentioned this, Dostoevsky's Dream of the Ridiculous Man, where the man seemed to have been dreaming only in the sense that he was asleep. There was no dream except there was just a flow of discussion or thought, not by which I don't want to signal that it was sort of this modernist free flow of consciousness or something like that. No, that it's a flow of self-discussion, just as we can have a discussion with anyone, or just as a discussion is usually meant as that between two beings. So the example I want to give in connection to this middle ground of the discussion, that way understood as being behind something which is, as it were, holding us captivated as Das Man, so far as different cultures and different geographical areas and different mindscapes coalesce and form different groups that we call the Das Man of the Russians, or the Das Man of the Ukrainians, or whatever, the Australians, whatever it may be, of people from Northern California, from Southern California, from Texas. There may be many ways to see what Das Man means, to see therefore what particular Daseins mean, that sort of share in the same Das Man-ish, as it were. That has a history, and for us in the West, the history of it has quite a bit to do with the move from Athens to Rome. So the journey in between there, you could see kind of spanning out an ancient trip to the moon, ancient challenge to get to the moon, flying from Aristotle and Plato to Christ as the Jewish Messiah or Messiah, as Jewish Messianism in Paul, um, over this ground of Jerusalem, as it were. So if you think about it, the notion that is so caught up with Christian thinking is this division between um, world understood as um, the love of money, which is a New Testament phrase right out of Paul. Um, the root of all evil is the love of money. So obviously, love of money means love of money rather than love of the good proper. Money would have to be somewhere down in the value spectrum, but then it gets pushed out to where it seems like it's the reverse. And then you kind of go crazy, and then you get Calvinism comes in and starts to regenerate money as a high value in some way. So that's one way to kind of look at what happened there. But what I wanted to point out is that in the Old Testament, you can see that money is actually not regarded as antipathetic to good in the way that this, the statement, you cannot love God and mammon both. Mammon meaning money. No man can serve two masters. So that's also a New Testament phrase. Both those notions are lifted directly from Aristotle and directly from thoughts in Plato. So Aristotle says that money as a form of nomos or convention, something which could be changed by the law, habit, or convention. It's something that should be used in order to benefit the citizens. It's like when you're turning the little lock, the combination lock, but this way, that way, you should come out with a combination which unlocks the lockbox in a way that benefits the citizens. Money is useful if you use it as a tool in the right way. It's not necessarily that we should say inflation is evil. If you use it, guide it in the right way, it's the keel of your ship, foundation of the house. You can use money well. It's when money becomes no longer in the service of humanity and becomes something which generates a raison d'etre, its own causality. It becomes its own dimension. It becomes its own God. It becomes its own reason for the society to exist. Then you see where you slip out of that Aristotelian notion that money should remain something subordinate to the polis, and therefore, in that way, rational, rather than, I think you could go to Dostoevsky, to The Possessed, and you could go to the Shatov discussion with the nihilist hero, Stravagin, and you could show that the same logic, this notion of replacing God with the state and all these nationalisms, so that God becomes the God of the state, is analogous to this thing of replacing a God with the raison d'etre of your country. You forget about the whole, and you say this is actually what we mean by God. This particular thing, this particular practice that we already know about, and which we merely want to continue because it's been so successful when the Dutch did it, in the Dutch Golden Age, because the Dutch started their Dutch East India Company, and they armed their corporations with soldiers. They said, here, corporations go make a lot of money in places where they can't resist you by main force. Same thing with the British East India Company. In this period, commerce began to look very favorable. It was unboundedly, not quite unboundedly, but it was very greatly favored. Um, uh, Took on the aspect of the Kalan, of the beautiful, in the sense of unbounded favoring. But that can be resisted. That can be there's forces that can resist that kind of transfixion towards a goal which becomes arbitrary, at least within this way of analyzing that we have in the West through Aristotle, through the Christian thinking, of saying that money should be some kind of equipment in the service of the office of who's ever in charge of trying to improve human life, where human life doesn't necessarily mean human life would mean, here's how it would translate from one polis to all human beings, is there would be a claim that certain aspects of it were universal, and then other groups of human beings, depending on their particular material differences, could follow that mental, pure mental blueprint. Um, there would be a claim that human beings were human beings, but there wouldn't be any claim that they would ever manifest properly as human beings, because they would always manifest according to their material composition, which would always be in some way arbitrary. Okay, that's just some, as usual, somewhat expressionistic, or, if you like, disgraceful, to use Leo Strauss's way of describing it, meditations on, let's, I'll, I'm tempted to say on world Dasein, although I suppose there will be quite a few people in the so-called, not the, in the so-called periphery areas of the world system, who wouldn't quite be part of the conversation enough. You see, in the same sense I was bringing up, they wouldn't be quite part of that conversation enough, where you could say there is a world Dasein, so there'd still be some outlier human beings who aren't part of that world Dasein. Okay,